My husband left my father's funeral to go on a trip with his mistress, but at 3:00 a.m., I received a text from the father I thought was dead. "I'm still alive. Come to the family mausoleum." Silently. Today, I need to tell you the story of my life. It was a story that still gives me goosebumps to this day. Before I got married, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. My soon-to-be husband, Calloway, and I had been dating for 3 years, plenty of time to believe our love was meant to be. Calloway was kind, attentive, and always seemed to put my needs above anyone else's. His mother, Vesper, showered me with compliments the first time we met at their country club. "Darling, you have such a radiant face, and you carry yourself with such effortless grace." "I am absolutely thrilled with you," she had said. Hearing that, my heart bloomed, and I felt truly blessed. Back then, I told my father, Thatcher Vance, the CEO of a massive tech logistics firm, "Dad, if I marry Calloway, I know I'll live a peaceful, happy life." My father just smiled sweetly. "If you're happy, I'm happy. But when you get married, try to be a little selfish for your own good. Don't go through life just putting up with things." I laughed it off, thinking my father worried too much. In front of me, he had always been flawless, a perfect, eloquent man. After the wedding, to save money for a custom build in the hills, and ostensibly to keep Vesper company, we moved into my in-laws' sprawling ancestral estate in Montecito. The house Vesper lived in was a massive, historic Mediterranean revival mansion. Though it was breathtaking on the outside, the first time I stepped inside, a strange chill ran down my spine. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the overwhelming reality of my new life. But as they say, time reveals all truths. After a few weeks of living there, I realized that chill wasn't just my imagination. Vesper's attitude changed overnight. At first, she called me her sweet girl. But the next day it became just Sutton. A few days later, the passive-aggressive comments began. "Sutton, can't you load these crystal glasses a bit more carefully? Sutton, why does it take you so long to organize a simple charity luncheon?" The tone itself wasn't screaming, but the intention was as sharp as a needle. Anyone who has been in a similar situation will understand there are words that hurt more than a physical blow. Meanwhile, Calloway morphed into a completely different person from the man I fell in love with. There were no more texts asking if I had eaten lunch. No more affectionate looks. When he got home from his corporate job, he would lock himself in his home office and refuse to come out. If I knocked on his door to tell him dinner was ready, he'd respond with heavy annoyance. Even on days he ate out, he would lie, saying, "The board meeting ran late." I knew he was lying, but I kept my mouth shut. A woman in love tends to be weak. I rationalized that if my husband was working so hard, I should be able to endure these minor domestic frictions. I remember a rainy afternoon when I rushed to bring a cashmere throw to my mother-in-law, who always complained about the draft in the solarium. Looking at me, she sipped her artisanal tea and said, "I'm not asking you to do everything, but this house has its own rhythm, its own standard. A daughter-in-law should have the initiative to manage things without being micromanaged. No one likes an idle woman." I gritted my teeth and responded with a tight smile. "Yes, Vesper, I'll keep that in mind." My chest felt tight. I was working remotely all day for my own job and scrambling to manage the estate's staff and prepare dinner by the time they wanted it. I was never idle, but I didn't want to worry my father, so I endured it. My father used to tell me, "Being too good isn't always a virtue, but if you're okay with it, then it's fine." Until that moment, I believed that if I was patient, my in-laws would eventually appreciate me. But no matter how hard I tried, that connection never sparked. The distance with Calloway became more glaring by the day. His phone was always face down, and if I walked into the room, he'd lock the screen instantly. Once, I cautiously asked, "Are you hiding something from me?" He snapped, "Don't start drama, Sutton. I don't have the bandwidth." From that day on, we lived like strangers in the same mansion, each locked in our own world. I told myself it was just an adjustment phase, that things would normalize, but the situation only deteriorated. One day, while bringing a tray of pressed green juice to Vesper's suite, I overheard her on the phone. "She's so absurdly naive. Who knows how long she'll last in this house? She's just a placeholder." From the other side of the oak door, I felt my heart stop. It wasn't just that she was bad-mouthing me. It was the crushing realization that my hopes for a family had been in vain. Despite these incidents, I thought they were just marital hurdles. I was young, hopeful, and believed in the sanctity of family. Not in my worst nightmares could I have imagined that all of this was merely the prologue to the tragedy about to unfold. I didn't know a dark abyss was opening beneath my feet, one that would swallow my life whole and destroy my faith in marriage and humanity. If I had known, I would have packed my bags that day. But I suppose that's life. You can measure the depth of an ocean, but you can never plumb the depths of the human heart. And everything began to collapse on the day I least expected it. That morning, the California sky was covered in a thick, gloomy marine layer, a bad omen. While I was in the kitchen, my phone rang incessantly. It was Garrick, my father's loyal chauffeur of over a decade. Normally, a stoic, grounded man, his voice was violently trembling today. "Mrs. Sutton, please stay calm. I had the day off, so the backup driver took him." Mr. Vance has been in an accident." I froze, and the world went dark. I didn't even hear the clatter of the ceramic mug slipping from my hands and shattering on the marble floor. I kept asking questions, but my mind was blank, packed with cotton. Only the word accident echoed in my skull. Calloway walked out of his office, frowning at the commotion. I told him through hysterical sobs, "Cal, my dad's been in a crash." Without a single word of comfort, he replied coldly, "Oh, well, we'll head over later." Vesper looked at me as if I had interrupted her morning meditation. "A grown woman shouldn't wail like that, Sutton. Calm down. Your father is getting up there in years. It was probably his own carelessness." Her words stabbed me like daggers, but I was in too much shock to react. I ran out, called an Uber, and rushed to my father's Bel Air estate. When I arrived, people were already coming and going with grim faces. Garrick ran up to support my weight. According to the Highway Patrol, the CEO's SUV went over a switchback on the Angeles Crest Highway. The backup driver is in a coma, and they couldn't find Mr. Vance intact. The car caught fire. I collapsed onto the driveway. In that instant, I felt a pain so sharp it was as if someone were crushing my heart in a vice. It was true what they say. Losing a parent feels like watching the main pillar of your universe crumble. That afternoon, Reverend Silas, a high-ranking Episcopal clergyman who was very close to our family's philanthropic foundation, appeared in his clerical collar, murmuring prayers. He claimed he had heard the news through the diocese, rushed to the coroner's office, and used his connections to expedite the recovery of the cremated remains so the soul of the departed could rest in peace. My hands shook as I looked at the heavy marble urn placed on the foyer altar. I never imagined I would be confronting my father's remains in such an abrupt, absurd manner. The wake was packed with executives from my father's tech firm, board members, and politicians. The memorial was grandiose, fit for a titan of industry. The suffocating scent of white lilies permeated everything, and the line of people offering condolences seemed endless. But amidst the towering floral arrangements and pitying glances, I felt incredibly small and utterly alone. I was chilled to the bone, as if that urn had sucked all the warmth from my body. I expected Calloway to be by my side, to hold my hand, but he didn't show up the entire day. He didn't answer my calls or texts. I tried to excuse him, telling myself he was handling a crisis with the company's stock plummeting due to the news. Then, I overheard two junior executives whispering behind me. "What is Calloway doing in street barts during his father-in-law's wake? Did you see his Instagram story? He looked pretty cozy on a yacht with some 20-something model." I whipped my head around. On the glowing screen of the executive's phone, I saw a photo of Calloway grinning ear to ear, his arm wrapped tightly around the waist of a blonde in a luxury beach resort. It was posted that very day, at the exact time people were mourning my father. I felt a dull blow to the back of my head. I gripped the back of a mahogany chair to keep from falling. I couldn't believe it. I, who had loved him so unconditionally, who had put all my faith into this marriage, I retreated into the hallway to hide the humiliation burning inside me. Vesper, noticing my ghostly pale face, shot me a dismissive look. "Calloway is a grown man. He has his own life, his own stress. Do not make a scene at a funeral, Sutton." Her words were salt in a gaping wound. My lips trembled as I forced a hollow smile. "I just wanted to know where my husband was." Vesper crossed her legs and took a sip from her crystal tumbler. "He's on a retreat. He needed to decompress. He's been working himself to the bone. Besides, You're managing the arrangements perfectly well on your own, aren't you? Night fell, and the attendees finally began to filter out. I sat vigil next to the altar, staring at my father's portrait, weeping inconsolably. Reverend Silas paced the halls reciting scripture, but his eyes kept darting toward the massive stack of memorial donation envelopes, calculating their worth. Around 3:00 a.m. Completely exhausted, I curled up on a velvet sofa, shivering under a thin cashmere blanket. My tears hadn't even dried when my phone buzzed once. I picked it up. It was an unknown number. The text was brief. "Sutton, it's Dad. I'm not dead. Come to the family mausoleum on the grounds. Silently. Don't tell anyone." A violent shudder ripped down my spine. My eyes widened so much I nearly dropped the phone. I read the words over and over, trembling from head to toe. It was undoubtedly my father's syntax, the specific punctuation, the way he phrased things. There was no doubt. A knot formed in my throat, and my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My father was alive. I sat up as if struck by lightning. That short message danced in my mind, every letter a blade picking the locks of my grief. How could he be dead? My instincts knew it was him. Anyone could spoof a number, but reproducing his exact cadence was impossible. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the armrest to steady myself. At that hour, the estate was tomb silent, broken only by the whistling of the coastal wind rattling the French doors and the rhythmic clicking of Reverend Silas's beads as he prayed near the urn. The dense, cloying smell of lilies turned my stomach. My mind was a chaotic storm. Calm down, I told myself. If my father was truly alive, it meant someone wanted the world to believe he was dead, and that meant the crash on the Angelus crest wasn't an accident. I swallowed hard and stood up silently. The moment my bare feet touched the hardwood, Vesper's bedroom door clicked open a fraction of an inch. Her gaze was as sharp as a scalpel in the dim light. "Sutton, what on earth are you doing prowling around at this hour?" I jumped and forced my voice to stay level. "Vesper, I have a terrible migraine. I just wanted to step out to the terrace for some fresh air." She looked me up and down with severe scrutiny. "Don't wander the grounds at night. During a period of mourning, it invites bad omens." I lowered my head, but inside, a fire was igniting. I walked back to the sofa and pretended to lay down, waiting for her door to click shut. When the soft padding of her slippers faded, I opened my phone again. The message glowed against the dark screen. I held my breath and decided to contact the only person I could trust. I texted him, ordering him to meet me discreetly by the back service gates immediately. 5 minutes later, Hollis materialized from the shadows. His face was gray from lack of sleep. He looked at me with deep concern. "Sutton, what's wrong? Why the urgency? You scared the hell out of me." I showed him the screen. Reading the text, his eyes bulged. "This can't be. I don't have this burner number saved, but this is 100% the boss's diction," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Hollis, remember yesterday when you said the security feed near the family cemetery glitched? You suspected someone had tampered with the network." Hollis nodded rapidly. "Yes. When the caterers were setting up, the camera looped for about 60 seconds, like someone had blocked the lens or hacked the feed." I stared into his eyes. Then, if my father is alive, someone tried to murder him and desperately needs the world to think they succeeded. Hollis swallowed hard. "What's the play, Sutton?" I exhaled a single word. "Go." We slipped out the back utility doors. The California moon was obscured by thick marine fog, and the night was freezing. The private family mausoleum was tucked behind a small grove of eucalyptus trees, a few hundred yards from the main house. In the oppressive atmosphere of mourning, the gravel path felt infinitely more sinister, scored by the chirping of crickets and the faint hum of the estate's generators. As we neared the stone structure, Hollis grabbed my arm. "I just checked the server logs on my tablet. There's a 1-minute blackout gap perfectly corresponding to the timestamp on that text." I felt the hair on my arms stand up. I scanned the darkness, but heard only the rustling of eucalyptus leaves. The cemetery was bathed in shadows. The only light was the faint, amber glow of a solar lamp illuminating the marble statue of an angel. And then, I saw it. The freshly engraved memorial plaque reading Thatcher Vance. My entire body trembled. I walked up and placed my hand on the cold stone. If my father was alive, whose remains were sitting in the urn in the foyer? And who had rushed the paperwork to claim it was him? Before I could unravel the thought, I heard a heavy rustling in the manicured hedges behind me. I spun around, and Hollis instantly clicked on his tactical flashlight. From the blinding beam emerged a staggering figure. His bespoke suit was shredded to rags, and his face was a mosaic of severe bruises, lacerations, and dried blood. But the eyes, they were the same piercing, intelligent eyes I had looked up to for 26 years. Dad. The word barely escaped my throat. I sprinted to him as if gravity had inverted. I held him fiercely, feeling my hot tears soak into his torn collar. My father gasped, his voice a ragged wheeze. "Sutton, it's me. I'm alive. Those bastards tried to kill me. Listen to me very carefully." I wept silently, terrified the sound would carry back to the house. "Dad, what happened? Who did this to you?" He squeezed my wrist, using his last reserves of strength to enunciate every syllable. "Calloway and his mother are not who you think they are." It felt as though someone had reached into my chest and crushed my lungs. I didn't fully comprehend the vastness of his words in that second, but a visceral certainty anchored me. My in-laws hadn't just been emotionally abusive to me. They were monsters who had orchestrated my father's execution. And what I thought was a tragic accident was merely the overture to a corporate bloodbath. I stood paralyzed in the freezing mist. I kept my arms around him, terrified he would vanish into smoke. Hollis quickly stripped off his heavy wool coat and draped it over my father's shivering shoulders. Thatcher leaned heavily against a stone obelisk, struggling to drag air into his lungs. Seeing him so broken shattered my soul. "Dad, name them. Who did this?" I begged, my voice cracking. He closed his eyes, fighting through the agony. His voice was a rasping whisper, but the words branded themselves into my brain. "It wasn't a DUI crash, sweetheart. It was a hit. They sabotaged the brakes and drugged my driver." The wind howled through the grove, sounding like a chorus of weeping ghosts. Hollis leaned in, his jaw set in pure fury. "Mr. Vance, who pulled the trigger on this? Tell us so I can move you to a secure safe house." My father opened his eyes, looking at us for a long, heavy moment before dropping the anvil. "Calloway, Vesper, Lachlan Cross, and Reverend Silas." I felt my skull vibrate. I shook my head in frantic denial. No, that can't be. Vesper is cruel, and Cal is a cheat. But murder? Dad! My father raised a trembling hand and rested it on my cheek. His voice carried a mix of profound sorrow and harsh reality. "Sutton, you still see the world through a lens of inherent goodness. Vesper and Calloway care only for power and capital. I discovered they had been embezzling millions from the firm's offshore accounts and leaking proprietary tech contracts to Lachlan's rival firm. Before I could present the dossier to the board, they struck." He paused, coughing a dry, painful hack. "Lachlan engineered the crash. They planned to plant an unidentified John Doe from the morgue in the wreckage. Lachlan bought off a corrupt medical examiner to bypass the DNA checks. Then, Reverend Silas used his clerical authority to fast-track the cremation and deliver the ashes to make it look respectable. It was a flawless loop. To the world, Thatcher Vance is ash in an urn. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. Every word he spoke was a sledgehammer systematically demolishing the pathetic, naive loyalty I had held for my marriage. "But how did you get out? Dad, how are you here?" I asked, my voice a frail thread. Leaning against the marble, he slowly pieced the nightmare together. Just before the SUV hit the hairpin turn, I felt the brakes give. I screamed at the driver, but his eyes were rolling back fentanyl in his coffee, likely. The car smashed through the guardrail. Just as it tipped over the cliff, I kicked my door open and threw myself onto the gravel shoulder. I clutched my chest. The mere mental image made me dizzy. I rolled into the deep brush down the ravine, knocked unconscious. By sheer luck, an off-the-grid survivalist setting traps found me breathing. He dragged me to his camper, gave me water, and patched me up. I didn't tell him who I was. I knew if I went to a hospital, Lachlan's people on the LAPD payroll would finish the job. Hollis ground his teeth. "They're operating like a cartel." "Where have you been hiding?" My father scanned the tree line. "In the state park bordering the estate, hiding in the brush by day, moving by night. Tonight, when I saw the caterers, the valet parking, and my own portrait in the foyer windows, I knew their coup was almost complete. I broke down, my tears hot and furious. Why didn't you signal me sooner? I was planning your funeral. He gripped my hand tightly. I couldn't. You live under their roof. If they suspected you knew, you'd be collateral damage. Through his calloused grip, I felt the boundless bitterness of a titan betrayed. A man who had built an empire with integrity, who had handed his daughter over to a family he trusted, only to be stabbed in the back. Hollis nodded with military precision. Mr. Vance, we move now. I've got an untraceable, off-the-books server warehouse in the valley. No cameras, no paper trail. You'll be a ghost. My father looked at me, waiting for my cue. I wiped my face violently, smearing my tears. I'm taking over, Dad. I will protect you, no matter what. In that frozen second, the submissive, people-pleasing Sutton died. I had to face the brutal reality. My in-laws weren't just toxic narcissists. They were calculating murderers intending to slaughter my bloodline and cannibalize our empire. I supported my father's weight, walking step by step through the coastal fog. With every crunch of gravel beneath my feet, I swore a blood oath that I would never let anyone step on me again. We smuggled my father into Hollis's SUV and drove to the valley. The warehouse was a concrete bunker, smelling of ozone and server coolant. Hollis set up a cot and began dressing my father's wounds with a first aid kit. I watched them, a Category 5 hurricane raging in my mind. The Rubicon was crossed. Before me lay a war I never asked for, against the very people I had called family. My father took my hand, his voice raspy. Sutton, from this second forward you are walking on a razor's edge. Go back to that mansion. Play the grieving, oblivious widow. No one can suspect the gears are turning. I nodded, though a cold terror rooted in my stomach. Every breath I took in that house would be toxic. Hollis chimed in. I'll procure antibiotics, burner phones, and provisions tomorrow. Mr. Vance stays off the grid. Don't worry about him, Sutton. I'd take a bullet for this man. My father sighed, patting Hollis's arm. I won't forget this, son. Sutton, I'm only breathing because of you two. I rested my hand over his. I had never wanted the sun to rise so badly. I had to sneak back into the lion's den before Vesper's morning routine. By the time I took an Uber back to the Montecito estate, the sky was bleeding streaks of silver and bruised purple. I pulled my cashmere beanie low and slipped through the kitchen service entrance. My heart was a bass drum. If anyone realized I had been gone all night, I was a dead woman walking. I paused in the hallway, panting. The chill of the AC helped clear my head. Flawless execution. No one can know you were at the mausoleum. As I crept toward the main staircase, the antique grandfather clock struck 5:15 a.m. The kitchen was dark. The only sound was the click of a gas burner. Vesper was standing by the stove, waiting for her kettle. She froze when she saw me. Her hawk-like gaze raked over my damp coat and messy hair. Sutton, are you just now coming inside? Her voice was laced with arsenic. I dropped my shoulders, adopting the posture of a broken woman. Yes, Vesper. I was out on the terrace. I couldn't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see the crash. I just paced the gardens until I felt numb enough to breathe. She scoffed, adjusting her silk robe. We are a family in mourning, highly visible to the press. If the neighbors or the paparazzi see you wandering the grounds like a ghost, it reflects poorly on our stability. I bowed my head. I'm sorry, I truly am. My chest ached with the injustice. I had lost my father, cried my eyes out, stayed up all night saving his life, and I still had to grovel to this monster just to survive the morning. Just then, Calloway descended the stairs. He wore linen shorts and a designer tee, looking as refreshed as a man who had slept 10 hours after a massage. Seeing me, he sneered. You look like a wreck, Sutton. Have you looked in a mirror? I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I didn't sleep well. He yawned loudly. I was up late with a venture capital partner in Street Barts handling damage control. I'm exhausted. I'm not going to the memorial service at the foundation today. You go and make my excuses. I forced my eyes to the floor. If I looked at him, the homicidal rage in my pupils would give me away. A venture capital partner. The blonde in the bikini was a business partner. I had to swallow the bile rising in my throat. Okay, I whispered. my voice intentionally trembling. Vesper immediately backed him up. Calloway carries the weight of the world right now. Your father's board is in chaos. Don't burden your husband with trivial social obligations, Sutton. Normally, I would have swallowed my self-respect and apologized. But this morning, there was no sorrow left, only a glacial, absolute hatred. Yet, I locked it away. I had to be the dumb, fragile trophy wife. I understand Vesper. She didn't know that the second I spoke, a silent, lethal war had commenced. During the memorial service that morning, I played my part beautifully. My eyes were swollen. My posture slumped. Reverend Silas arrived early, his clerical robes flowing, turning his rosary beads with a look of practiced, hypocritical sorrow. He hovered near the memorial donation box, pocketing high-dollar checks with the slickness of a casino dealer. Looking at him made my skin crawl. He had personally transported the ashes of a burned stranger into my home, lying to the faces of hundreds of mourners. He was an accessory to attempted murder, standing under a stained glass window pretending to be a man of God. The audacity choked me. I made a vow. Sutton, you are no longer the sweet girl. You are going to make them terrified to even hear your name. But first, I had to disarm them with weakness. By afternoon, I told Vesper I needed to go to my father's corporate headquarters in Century City to collect some personal mementos from his office. Vesper's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Documents? Mementos? Leave the corporate affairs to Calloway's team. Focus on the funeral. I let my voice crack, forcing a fresh tear to spill over my lashes. It's just his favorite fountain pen, Vesper, and the framed photo of my mother. I just miss him so much. She stared at me, then sighed, her posture relaxing. She bought it. She thought I was just a sentimental, weak-willed idiot. Fine. Make it quick. When I arrived at the sleek glass tower in LA, the staff parted like the Red Sea, offering somber condolences. I nodded meekly, keeping up the charade. But the second I entered the executive suite, my demeanor snapped to absolute focus. Hollis slipped in behind me and locked the heavy mahogany door. Sutton, I brought the decryption drives. We need to scrape the local servers before Laughlin's IT guys wipe them remotely. We went to work. My father's office smelled like expensive leather and cedar. It broke my heart, but I compartmentalized the grief. Hollis typed furiously. Look at this. The shell company ledgers. Calloway's digital signature is on all the fraudulent IP transfers. My hands shook as I leaned over the monitor. Hollis opened another folder. And here, wire transfers to Reverend Silas's offshore diocese accounts. $5 million, marked as anonymous philanthropic grants the day of the crash. My blood ran cold. It's a murder receipt. This is smoking gun evidence, Sutton, Hollis whispered. Clone the drive. Take everything. I looked around the room where my father had built his legacy. It was my turn to protect it. Returning to the Montecito estate felt like walking into a viper's nest. I walked into the living room to find Calloway sprawled on the couch, watching a Lakers game, a scotch in hand. He looked at me with open disdain. Where the hell have you been? You left my mother to deal with the caterers. I swallowed my disgust. I told you, I went to Dad's office to get some photos. Vesper glided into the room. Did you bring home any corporate files, Sutton? Calloway needs to review all legal paperwork. I held up a small cardboard box containing a silver pen, a framed photo, and a paperweight. Just memories, I said softly, looking pathetic. Vesper visibly relaxed. She genuinely believed I was no threat. That night, lying in the dark, I listened to the house. I knew I had crossed the event horizon. The dutiful daughter-in-law was dead. The woman breathing in this bed was the architect of their destruction. The next morning, the wind off the Pacific was bitter and sharp. I stood before my vanity mirror, pinning my hair back, ensuring I looked like a woman buckling under grief. But behind my bloodshot eyes was a titanium resolve. Today was the day Calloway and his cabal planned an emergency board meeting to formally seize control of Vance Tech. I wore a simple black tailored suit. As I walked downstairs, Vesper assessed me. The board members will be tense today, Sutton. Sit quietly. Do not embarrass us. Yes, Vesper. I know my place, I replied, my voice a whisper. When I arrived at the Century City headquarters, the atmosphere was suffocating. I walked directly toward the executive boardroom. The frosted glass doors were cracked open, and I heard Calloway's slick, commanding voice. With Thatcher's tragic passing, the markets need stability. As his son-in-law and VP of Acquisitions, I am stepping in as interim CEO, effective immediately. I took a deep breath, pushed the heavy doors open, and let the hinges squeal. The room of 20 executives froze. Calloway's jaw dropped for a fraction of a second before he recovered his arrogant smirk. "Sutton, what are you doing here? You should be resting." I walked slowly to the head of the long obsidian table. I looked at him, letting a perfect mix of sorrow and sharp confusion play on my face. "Please continue. I'm just curious why the restructuring is happening before the ink on my father's death certificate is even dry, or before his will is read." The room grew dead silent. Vesper, sitting in a plush leather chair in the corner, went rigid. "Sutton, this is a closed corporate proceeding. Go home." I rested my hands flat on the cold table, my voice carrying to every corner. According to the corporate bylaws my father drafted, no unilateral transitions can occur until the primary beneficiary is briefed. Isn't that right, legal counsel? The head of legal awkwardly cleared his throat and nodded. Calloway slammed a hand on the table. "Sutton, do not make a scene." I offered a faint, chilling smile. "I'm not making a scene, Cal. I'm just enforcing the law. Besides, there are so many irregularities regarding my father's crash." Right on cue, my phone vibrated in my pocket. "Hollis. LAPD is in the lobby." Anonymous tip filed. I looked up, my eyes wide and innocent. "Oh, it seems the police are downstairs. I wonder if it has to do with the corporate audits. Or perhaps the reverend who handled my father's remains so hastily." In the back row, Reverend Silas, who had been invited to give an opening prayer for the board, turned the color of chalk. He began sweating profusely, tugging at his stiff collar. The tension in the room spiked to hazardous levels. Calloway marched over and grabbed my bicep, his fingers digging into my skin. "What the hell are you playing at?" he hissed. I stared into his eyes, dead and hollow. "I'm not playing anything. Just looking for transparency." An administrative assistant poked her head into the room. "Excuse me, the police are asking for Calloway Miller and Reverend Silas to come down for questioning regarding a financial tip." Panic flashed in Calloway's eyes, naked and real. I had drawn first blood. That evening, the Montecito house felt like a powder keg. Calloway's high-priced corporate lawyers had managed to spring him and Silas from questioning within hours, claiming a misunderstanding. But the damage was done. They knew I was no longer the docile pawn. I was a liability. While I was packing some clothes in my bedroom, Calloway kicked the door shut behind him. His face was contorted in feral rage. "What the fuck did you do at the firm today, Sutton?" he growled. I shrank back, playing the terrified wife. "I just asked questions. My dad is dead." He stepped into my space, his voice dropping to a lethal, quiet register. "Don't push me, Sutton. This is bigger than your little feelings. Stop digging, or you'll regret it." His threat was palpable. I looked at the floor, letting my shoulders tremble. "Okay, I'm sorry." He scoffed, disgusted, and slammed the door behind him. Around midnight, parched, I crept out to the kitchen for water. As I passed the grand living room, I heard hushed voices. I pressed myself against a marble pillar, my heart threatening to crack my ribs. 3 people were in the room. Vesper, Calloway, and Lachlan Cross. Lachlan's voice was gravelly and ruthless. "The wife is a problem. She spooked the board, and the cops asking about Silas's accounts is a red flag. She knows too much." Vesper sighed, swirling her bourbon. "I thought she was a vapid little trophy. I never imagined she had a spine. After today, it's clear she's a threat." Calloway chimed in. "She brought a box home from the office. What if she copied the hard drives?" Lachlan grunted. "We don't leave loose ends. The girl has to go." My knees buckled. I had to bite my own hand to stop from screaming. They were casually planning my murder over nightcaps. Calloway didn't hesitate. "I'll handle the logistics. Just make sure you're at the country club, Mom. You need a rock-solid alibi." Vesper nodded. "Make it clean, Lachlan. A mugging gone wrong. No trace back to us." "I'm calling the deacon," Lachlan said. He's a ghost. He specializes in vanishing people. The Deacon. I recognized the moniker from a true crime podcast my father had listened to, a high-end cartel cleaner in LA. I was out of my depth. I crept back to my room, violently nauseous. My phone lit up. It was Hollis. Camera feeds near the safe house just got tagged. Someone's hunting for your dad. You are in immediate danger. Wear the GPS tracker I slipped in your purse. I was entirely surrounded, but as I sat on the edge of the bed, the panic crystallized into cold, hard rage. I wasn't going to die. I was going to hand them the rope they'd hang themselves with. The next evening, the sky was a bruised purple, threatening a massive Pacific storm. The wind howled through the palm trees. Around 7:00 p.m., as I was in the kitchen, Calloway walked in, looking stressed. He rubbed his temples in a show of fake exhaustion. "Sutton, I'm buried in legal work for the transition. Can you do me a favor? Run down to Reverend Silas's parish in Santa Barbara and drop off this memorial donation check? It's time-sensitive for the foundation." My stomach plummeted. It was the setup. Lachlan had choreographed it perfectly. I looked up, feigning anxiety. "Can't it wait? It's getting dark, and a storm is coming. I don't want to drive the canyon road alone." Calloway's mask slipped, revealing pure irritation. "Jesus. Sutton, grow up. I'm handling a billion-dollar transition. Just drive the damn check over." Vesper walked in, her voice unnervingly soothing. "It'll take 20 minutes, darling. A good wife helps shoulder her husband's burdens." I looked at them, two vipers waiting for me to step into the trap. "Okay, I'll go." As I grabbed my keys, I saw the ghost of a smile play on Vesper's lips. She was looking at a dead woman. I walked out to the driveway. Before I even reached my Range Rover, I pulled out my phone and texted Hollis. "They pulled the trigger. I'm moving. Track the GPS. If I go dark, send the cavalry." I didn't even get to put my phone away. A black, unmarked cargo van screeched to a halt at the edge of the driveway. The side door slid open. Before I could scream, a heavy canvas bag was shoved over my head, and massive arms dragged me into the vehicle. The door slammed shut. The van reeked of stale cigarette smoke, bleach, and gasoline. I thrashed, but a massive hand clamped over my throat. A voice like grinding stones whispered in my ear. "Scream, and I break your neck right here. Understood?" It was the Deacon. I went limp. In the front seat, I heard another thug chuckle. Mr. Cross said to make it a clean sweep. Once we dump her off the pier, the husband gets the whole pie. I bit my lips so hard the metallic taste of blood flooded my mouth. The van tore down the winding coastal highway, throwing me violently side to side. It felt like an eternity in the suffocating darkness. Finally, the tires crunched over broken glass and gravel. The van stopped. I was dragged out by my hair and thrown into a chair. The canvas bag was yanked off. The harsh glare of an industrial halogen light blinded me. As my eyes adjusted, I saw I was in an abandoned fish-packing warehouse near the Ventura docks. The smell of rotting brine and rust was overpowering. The Deacon, a massive man with a scarred neck, stood over me, zip-tying my wrists to the chair. "Clever girl, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Shame it ends in a barrel." I stared unblinkingly at him. I wasn't shaking anymore. A heavy metal door rolled open at the far end of the warehouse. Footsteps echoed on the concrete. From the shadows emerged Vesper, draped in a cashmere trench coat. Behind her was Reverend Silas, looking terrified but complicit. And finally, Calloway. The three architects of my nightmare had come to watch the finale. Vesper stopped a few feet away, crossing her arms. "Sutton, you have been a profound disappointment." I laughed, a dry, raspy sound that echoed off the high tin ceiling. "No, Vesper. I just became an inconvenience." Reverend Silas wrung his hands, his voice pitching high with panic. "She knows about the ashes. She knows everything. If we don't end this tonight, I'm ruined." I turned my dead gaze to him. A man of the cloth, trading fake ashes for blood money. "Does God take wire transfers now, Silas?" He took a step back, going pale. Vesper slapped a hand against a rusted table. "Enough! You got arrogant, Sutton. You thought you could outplay us. But you're nothing but a naive little parasite we took pity on. Calloway stepped forward, grabbing my chin with a bruising grip. I warned you, Sutton. You should have just stayed quiet and shopped. I looked into the eyes of the man I had slept next to for years. You were terrified of your mother. You were terrified of Lachlan, but you were never terrified of me. That was your fatal mistake. Calloway raised his hand to slap me. In that exact fraction of a second, I pressed my thumb against my hip, clicking the panic button on the GPS tracker stitched into my blazer pocket. Sirens wailed in the distance, multiplying rapidly. The screech of armored tires tore through the night. Before the deacon could pull his weapon, the warehouse's reinforced doors were blown off their hinges with a deafening blast. Blinding tactical strobe lights flooded the room. Red laser sights danced across everyone's chests. FBI SWAT, drop your weapons on the ground now. The deacon lunged for the back exit, but a rubber bullet caught him in the knee, dropping him instantly. Officers swarmed him, burying his face in the concrete. Calloway froze, his hands in the air, his face completely drained of blood. He opened his mouth to speak, but an officer slammed him against the rusted table, clicking cold steel cuffs around his wrists. Vesper stumbled backward in her designer heels, hyperventilating. No, wait, I didn't, I was just… An officer yanked her arms behind her back, reading her Miranda rights. The untouchable matriarch was weeping, her makeup running down her face in black streaks. Reverend Silas dropped to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching his rosary. God forgive me, they made me do it. An FBI agent walked in, holding an evidence bag containing Silas's ledgers and burner phones confiscated from his car outside. We have the wire transfers, the fake cremation certificates, and conspiracy to commit murder. You're all going away for a very long time. A female officer rushed over and cut the zip ties off my wrists. Ma'am, are you injured? I rubbed my bleeding wrists, shaking my head. Through the chaotic swarm of blue uniforms, Hollis sprinted into the warehouse. He looked like he was about to pass out from sheer adrenaline. Sutton, are you okay? I collapsed into his arms, finally letting out a breath I felt I'd been holding for a week. I'm alive, Hollis. We got them. Hollis held me tight. Garrick was parked a mile out. When your GPS stopped at this warehouse, I called the federal task force. We had Lachlan's phones wiretapped since yesterday. I let an officer drape a shock blanket over my shoulders. As they walked me out into the cool, salty Pacific air, I stopped and looked back. Calloway, Vesper, and Silas were being shoved into separate squad cars. Calloway caught my eye, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror and regret. I didn't feel an ounce of pity. They were reaping exactly what they had sown. I was taken to the federal field office to give my official statement. I laid out everything. The 3:00 a.m. text, the fake ashes, the embezzlement, and the kidnapping. The lead agent closed his notepad, shaking his head. Mrs. Miller, with the wiretaps and the digital footprint your team recovered, this is an airtight RICO and attempted murder case. When I walked out of the interrogation room, Garrick was waiting in the lobby. The stoic chauffeur had tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you or your father, Sutton. I hugged him. You saved us, Garrick. Both of us. The next morning, the California sun was blindingly bright. Hollis and I walked back into the FBI field office for a follow-up. Sitting on a bench in the hallway, with his back to me, was a man with graying hair. He stood and turned around. My heart leapt. Dad. My father smiled, his eyes shining with tears. He looked bruised and battered, but his posture was that of a conqueror. He opened his arms, and I buried my face in his chest, crying like a little girl. He stroked my hair. You did it, sweetheart. You were magnificent. We were ushered into a secure briefing room. The federal prosecutor sat across from us, laying out the confiscated evidence. My father formally gave his statement, detailing the sabotaged brakes, his escape on the Angeles Crest, and Lachlan's overarching conspiracy. The prosecutor nodded. With Miss Vance alive, the murder charge drops to attempted. But we are upgrading the charges to racketeering, corporate espionage, and kidnapping. There is no bail for any of them. My father looked at me, a fierce pride in his eyes. We're taking the company back today, Sutton. Get ready. 2 days later, the atmosphere at Vance Tech headquarters was electric. Rumors had swirled, but no one knew the truth. When my father's armored SUV pulled up to the glass pavilion, Hundreds of employees were gathered. When Thatcher Vance stepped out, alive and walking under his own power, the crowd erupted into a stunned, deafening roar. People gasped, some wept. The man they had mourned was standing before them, a titan returned from the grave. I walked beside him. We entered the executive boardroom, which had been commandeered by federal regulators and the board of directors. Calloway, Vesper, and Silas had been brought in under federal escort, flanked by their defeated defense attorneys, to formally sign the emergency injunction, stripping them of their illicitly gained assets and corporate standing. Seeing my father walk through those doors, Calloway looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Vesper couldn't even lift her head. My father stood at the head of the table. His voice boomed with absolute authority. I never thought I would stand in this room and look at the faces of people who orchestrated my assassination. The board members gasped. My father laid out the evidence, the embezzlement, and the fake cremation. He looked dead at Calloway. I treated you like a son, and you sold my life for a few offshore accounts. Calloway wept, his shoulders shaking in pathetic spasms. My father pulled a thick legal binder from his briefcase. I am executing my updated corporate will and trust. Effective immediately, 100% of my voting shares, assets, and the CEO mantle are transferred to my daughter, Sutton Vance. Calloway Miller and Vesper Miller are stripped of all shares, pensions, and access to this firm. They are officially bankrupt. The room erupted into applause. It wasn't just corporate protocol. It was a righteous, brutal justice. I looked at my father, overwhelmed with emotion. We had weathered the storm. The next day, I drove back to the Montecito estate one last time, accompanied by private security. I was there to collect the last of my personal items. Vesper and Calloway had been granted a 1-hour supervised release to pack their personal belongings before their assets were frozen and they were remanded to federal custody. As I walked out with my overnight bag, Vesper broke away from a security guard and dropped to her knees on the gravel. She looked haggard, a shell of the terrifying socialite she used to be. Sutton, please. Tell the prosecutor to go easy on me. I'm an old woman. I'll die in federal prison. I looked down at her. My heart was a fortress of ice. You lost the right to my mercy the second you ordered a hit on my life, Vesper. Calloway stumbled out of the front door, looking wretched. Sutton, please. I love you. I was scared of Lachlan. I can change. I stopped. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a profound, exhausting pity. I reached into my designer tote bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I dropped it at his feet. Those are the divorce papers. Sign them before you get to cell block D. Calloway fell to his knees, openly sobbing, grasping at the hem of my coat. Please, Sutton, don't do this. I stepped back. You can wake someone who is sleeping, Cal. But you can never wake someone who is only pretending to be asleep. You buried this marriage yourself. I turned my back on them and walked to my car. As the iron gates of the estate closed behind me, cutting off the sound of Calloway's weeping, I felt lighter than I had in years. The heavy stone that had crushed my spirit had been pulverized. Months later, the federal court handed down the sentences. Lachlan Cross got the maximum for conspiracy to commit murder. Reverend Silas got 20 years for fraud and evidence tampering. Vesper and Calloway were sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Walking out of the Los Angeles courthouse, the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. My father held my hand tightly. I don't hold any anger anymore, Sutton. I have you, and that's all I need. I leaned my head against his shoulder. The darkness was finally behind us. I was no longer the subservient daughter-in-law, terrified of her own shadow. I was Sutton Vance, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire, a survivor, and a woman who had walked through the fire and forged herself into steel.